Hello, and welcome to our third episode of the Sunnyview Schools podcast. Today, we're going to talk about teachers, and to host this podcast, we have Mr. McKean. Mr. McKean, go for it.
I jumped in there.
You jumped in big time.
I know, right? Not trying to take your job at all, I promise. But on this podcast today, I'm not alone. As we are talking about teachers and students, I have got some lovely teachers and students with me. To my left, we have... Could you introduce yourself, please, to our lovely audience?
I suppose I could do that. I am Kate Brown. Miss Brown? Kate Brown. Do I use my name? I'll use my full name.
Yeah.
I teach history and geography at Sunnyview. That is my job.
Thank you. And we also have some students joining us today to give their views on this wonderful topic.
I'm Mariana. Both Miss Brown and Mr. McKean have taught me before, and I'm a student.
And I'm Elsa. I've been taught by Mr. McKean, but not Miss Brown, and I'm also a student.
Okay. And for this podcast to even work, we couldn't do it without our lovely audiovisual team. So, audiovisual team, can you say hello and introduce yourselves?
Okay.
Yeah.
Not the audiovisual too.
I think I set you up pretty well there, guys.
Hello, my name is Erica Matsuda. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect.
Great.
That's good.
Wow.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. And also we have a live audience with us here today to help share their views with us too. So, the topics that we are going to be discussing today are what makes a good teacher and what makes a good student. Let's start with the latter. And I'm going to ask our lovely students here what they think about this topic. First thing, Mariana, would you consider yourself a good student?
Well, I think in the sense that I complete my work, usually on time, not always, but if I need an extension, I will ask for one and I won't make an excuse. I think that my grades are pretty decent. I study, so I guess in that sense, I am a good student. I don't know if that also includes like the personality part, but I guess like objectively I am a good student.
Elsa, same question.
I agree with Mar. I think Mar is definitely a good student. And I think I aspire to be a good student, and that's what I constantly try and do. And I think that when you constantly are trying to be a good student, you are able to achieve that. So I would consider myself a good student.
Wonderful. Okay, now let's hear from the teacher's perspective. What is a good student to you, Miss Brown?
See, I think there's a lot of pressure to be a good student, to be honest. I think it's tough. I think we need to remember that not every day is the same. And I think the strive idea is a really good idea, that that's what you want to do. But you know that every day you might not hit exactly the target you're trying to hit. I think for me, a good student is self-motivated. Somebody who really wants to do the best that they can do. And they're not afraid to ask for help if they need help, or ask for extensions, as you said there, Mariana. I think that makes a good student. I also think a good student is kind, I suppose. I mean, this is when we're getting into the personality. I mean, are we going to separate this? Are we going to say, okay, we've got the studying part. What way do you want to do it?
Yeah, let's roll with it. Let's talk about, being a good student is something that is multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
It's not just made up with one set criteria. There are lots of different variables there. So the personality is important, I would say, no?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. I think part of it, though, I mean, all students are different, right?
They are.
It's just, I think this is such a difficult question.
It is.
I think, okay, there's some ideas. Yes, they study a lot. Yes, they strive to do the best they can. But I also think things like having a good sense of humour is really important.
Yeah.
Being flexible, being able to laugh at themselves, realising when things are not the be-all and end-all.
Absolutely.
And, can cope under pressure as best they can.
Yeah.
And we have to help with that, though.
We do. We definitely do. And those are life skills, right?
Yeah.
Being a good student, it's not just for the purpose of school. It's also, these are skills that you can take into life, dealing with setbacks and dealing with, failures or things that you may consider as a failure, and how you pick yourself up from that. That shows a lot about you and whether you are a good student or not. Albert, as you are a parent of a student at Sunnyview School.
I am.
What do you think makes a good student? And second question, are you able to recognise that in him?
I think a good student
For those of you not aware, his son is in the room, and I'm not trying to be very mean. I'm doing this deliberately on purpose.
Good student is dedication mostly. I don't think it has anything to do with anything else, just dedication. Dedicate yourself to studying and learning whatever it is that you have to learn the way you're expected to learn it, especially that. Does my son do that? He never does it the first term. He does it after the second term.
Well,
Basically,
here,
he's-
history, can I just interject here, on Gabe's behalf, somehow did quite well in history. Not sure, not completely sure how it happened, still a mystery to me to this very day. But definitely, maybe it was the second term. Maybe the dedication, it kicked in the second term, do you think?
Which is a lesson, I think, is a lesson to all students that it doesn't matter, if you start off terribly. It's, realizing that you can pick yourself up and having those tools, which I think clearly for him, it worked, and it shows that he has that dedication and he was able to reflect, which, is very hard for some people to do.
It is, agreed.
There was also an English lit, there is a student that she went, we talk about this in class because it was really amazing what she did. She did it in history as well. She went from she basically, her real grade was 2, I guess, letters higher than her mock, which is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
But again, it's, it's incredible, but it's also possible. And I think students need to realize that when they are putting themselves in that position, and finding the right tools, asking the right questions, being curious, being, aware that they could make mistakes, that it's not, even though we're teaching or they're learning in kind of a linear process, it's not. There are going to be days where you're going to be on the ball. Look, we're leading up to Christmas now. Whose head is really in the game right now, right? So we've kind of got to think about it from that perspective. So moving on, there are obviously younger listeners that we have, in our school. We are lucky that we are a school that goes right from preschool all the way up to year 13 to 18-year-olds. So from our students, what advice would you give our younger students in order to be a better version of themselves at school? What would you say?
I think I have one idea. So I think that one big part of being a good student is that you need to find strategies and things to do that are sustainable. So essentially you need intrinsic motivation. So something that is not just kind of, I'm studying because I want to get to this university. That's very external. And it needs to be something within you that is constantly there. And so I think that one key thing is finding interest in what you're learning. So even though it's something that initially, I remember having experiences with history, for example. I remember when I started taking history more, when it was kind of a bigger subject when I got into year 7, at first I was like, I don't know about history. It's kind of the subject. It's the boring one. But then but I didn't end up thinking that at all. No. I didn't end up thinking that in the end, because I said to myself, I wanted to change the way that I looked at it.
Yeah.
And so I just started trying to take interest in the subject and just change I changed my mindset about it. And then it was a subject that I ended up choosing for GCSE and wanted to choose for A-level, but just wasn't able to because I had too many.
Oh, you had the clash, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, just off the back of that, it makes me think of Mariana, because the French Revolution, this is very, I don't know, it's not general, it's very specific to you.
Go for it.
But the French Revolution was pretty hardcore, there was a lot there.
Yes.
But I could see you were, but I could see you were really taking an interest in it, and you even listened to podcasts like this one, and read around the topic, and by the end, your knowledge was tip top.
Yeah, no, I agree with Elsa. I do definitely think that part of it is just having an interest, but it is kind of hard when you're in your 7, 8, and 9, because that's before you can choose what you want to do and what you can drop. So it's sometimes, I guess, it's hard to kind of force yourself to be interested in something that you're not. I hated physics. I did not like math, but I guess it's just also perseverance. And for me, I had the Stream University that I wanted to go to, and yes, that was external, but that also pushed me to work hard. And Elsa, I was thinking about this before, about what makes a good student, how there are some people who are just naturally smart, or they have very good concentration skills, so they can pay attention in class very well. Like Elena Ayers is very good, has very high concentration. She only had to started studying a month before the A-level for history, and she still aced it. I had to start 3 months before because my concentration levels are poor.
Right.
So I think that for like Elsa and I are, we're the kind that need to study extra. Our concentration isn't amazing. And so for those people, I think that year 7 is kind of where you have to start the hustle and start kind of training yourself,
sure.
I guess,
But
to
then
study.
that's also, I think, where both of your personalities come into that too. I think having that extra time to study makes you feel more comfortable that you are a good student and you are doing everything you can.
Yeah.
Because I think knowing both of you as I do, I think if you didn't do that, you wouldn't feel comfortable. And I think that's kind of that self-reflection is part of what makes, being a good student. Albert, as you are a parent, what do you think parents can do to help with their children? Imagine, they have children at home who are reluctant to participate at school, or who, school isn't just for them. What would your suggestions be?
I'm the worst father to ask that.
I don't believe it. No.
I've been very, very lucky in the sense that Gabe's always been pretty much on top of it without having to be told.
Right.
I think the secret is to know your child, and let them do the work.
Right.
If they learn how to do the work at home, they'll get into the flow.
Yeah.
I don't really subscribe to the whole sit there, shut up and study. I want to see you study until you finish your, because that creates, it did for me when I was a child.
Right.
When I was forced to do something, I just didn't want to do it. And I don't think that's naturally in anybody's psyche. So I'm a live and live kind of guy.
Yeah. No, I think that's important too, because, we need to foster autonomy. Because again, skills for life.
Well, I was thinking, even just as a year 7 student, starting right from the beginning, I think simple things like organisation, super important.
Absolutely.
Just to have their stuff with them. The minute they start forgetting books and having to write on random bits of paper and then transfer that into their book, that's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying that being a student is partly just wanting to be a good student, because if you want to be a good student, then you're going to be doing things like making sure you've got your agenda and you're writing things down and you know when things are. That's like the first step that anyone would need to take. Right. And I also want to say, adding on to what you were saying before about kind of how to take interest in a subject and how that can be kind of hard, even especially in year 7, because you haven't chosen any of your subjects, you're still feeling forced to do everything. Yeah. I think a couple things I did, and it depends on the subject too and what the subject is like. But one thing is you can kind of think about how it applies in the real world. I remember that was something that kind of drew me, or like it made me more fascinated about subjects, because I was like, oh wait, like I'm walking around and this thing I learned in biology, I notice it happening within me, so things like that. That's one way to do it. Or another way, for other ones where you feel like, oh, I don't see how I apply this in my everyday life. Another way to think about those is kind of to think of them as a game. And that can make it fun too, because you're sort of trying to piece things together as a puzzle, and
history is like the perfect example of doing that. It's like a story. History since year 7 was my favorite. It was my favorite subject. I'd always look forward to going to history, even throughout the parts that I didn't like the Industrial Revolution. I hated that so much. Or the Tudors.
They're not all good.
It's not all good parts.
Was not fun, but it's okay. Year 7s, it gets better. It does. Sometimes it gets worse, but it's okay. I mean, if you like it and you treat it like a little story and you watch videos or podcasts or movies, and it's fine. Yep. I don't know how to say that about physics. I hate physics so much.
You can see that one more as a game, though.
Yeah. Maybe.
Where you have formulas and things like that.
That's the most boring game ever.
But then I think
no offense to the physics department.
Sorry. But I think
as physics students, we agree wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Oh wow. Okay, that's not what I was expecting. But I think for some students, it's kind of realizing as well. I think with physics, a lot of the time, it's not kind of like say lit or one of the kind of a humanities subject or like a philosophy, for example, where you can kind of discuss and then be like it's much more. Whereas I think physics provides students with that clear goal, right, and be like, this is, it's right clear as day, right or wrong.
Yeah,
there's no difference from that, and some people feel comfortable with that too. So I think students, I think when they realise that could be, the case, that could draw them there.
Sometimes I wish I did teach physics. Or sometimes I wish something that's right or wrong, that's not
as a teacher
argument based.
Well, as a segue, Now we're talking about teachers.
We didn't even practice
We didn't. I know
that.
this was not even rehearsed. As a wonderful segue. So
Yes.
you wish you were a physics teacher, huh?
No, I want to backtrack. I don't. No, for the
okay.
record, no.
For the record, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as we are now moved on to the topic of teachers, potentially a little bit more juicier in this aspect. What makes a good teacher? And I will start with the other teacher in the room.
I just want to say that whatever I say doesn't mean that's something I do.
Right. Okay.
Because I don't want to say, oh, that means I'm an amazing teacher. But, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to
Okay.
be that person.
Right.
So I'd say if I float out of my body
Yeah.
and look down on
Yeah. No.
look
No.
down on this,
Yeah.
I would say a good teacher is someone who motivates their students
Right.
to achieve the best they can achieve and who pushes them. And I mean, maybe this is slightly me, is never quite content.
Yes, that is you, man.
Never
I say that in a good way.
Okay.
Always something to be done.
All right.
Even if it's a very wonderful essay, always something to be done. I will
Okay.
never give full marks. That bit is about me. Okay.
Right.
But the motivating part, yes, I do try, but obviously we have good days, bad days, etc., etc. Right?
Sure.
But I do say, for me personally, there's always work to do. But say it in a positive way,
Yeah.
not as a "you're terrible, you're the worst."
Of
No,
course, language is
positive,
important.
Constructive criticism always,
All right.
whether for good or bad, Mariana.
Okay.
For
well,
good.
Mariana, what would you say? What makes a good teacher? You're now in year 13, so you've seen a few teachers in your time here. What would you say to this question?
I agree with Miss Brown. I don't think there's not really much more to add there. I think that a teacher also that cares about their students, because you got teachers that don't want to be teachers. And I think that's really sad because sometimes they make it very obvious that they don't want to be teachers, that they don't like their job or whatever, that they're underpaid, which I get that. I totally understand. But it's just...
No comment.
Not naming names. But I mean, all the teachers that I've had, at least like 90% of them are very obviously enjoying their job, or at least they started off wanting to be a teacher. You know, it's not something that they just kind of did because it's whatever. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. I think the motivation aspect is really big, and when you form a connection with your students, usually that pushes them to want to impress their teacher, or get their approval, or do good by them, I guess. And yeah, I'm just thinking of my teachers. Like Mr. Wright has been my teacher since I was 11, so and then so there was always that he was almost like this father figure, so I always like worked hard and tried my best to impress him, whatever. And then with Miss Brown, the same thing. But with you, it was different because I guess you're closer in age. I just wanted to, like a friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you're like my age.
Wow. Yes, I am. Graduated really early. Sorry, carry on.
So yeah, I guess it was more like a sister or like a friend. I just really like your older sister. You just want her to like you. So I was like, working really hard in that aspect. So yeah, same with you, sir. It's when Miss McDonald's like mom, with you it's like brother. So again, we work really hard.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, we'll get back. I'm going to come back to that point in a second after we've heard from Elsa. Elsa, what would you like to add to this?
I also agree with everything that's been said. I think it's really important to have that connection with the students.
Right.
And also what you were saying before about, if teachers are constantly making it clear that they don't want to be there, that they're not enjoying it themselves, I think that's projected onto the students. And what I was talking about before, where you need to be interested in the subject, the students aren't going to really be able to have that. Or I mean, some might if they already naturally had that, but if they didn't, they're not going to have that same experience if the teachers are being like that. So I think it's very important for the teachers to be passionate about their subjects. And so
or at least like tolerate them,
Exactly,
at
exactly.
least act like you want to be there.
Yeah. And make, start up conversation in the classroom, make it interesting. But also I think I will say that you and I are both quite similar students. So I think that, with teachers, what we think are, make great teachers might be really different for other students too.
Yeah.
Because I think that different teachers will be good teachers for different students.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, one size doesn't necessarily fit all in that sense there too. And I think, that's why I think it's important that we have that range of subjects, the range of experiences as well. Albert, what would you say makes a good teacher?
From a parent's point of view, or from
Well, yeah, from a parent's point of view. Now that, and if you want to add anything to what the students have said, because
well, I have a question for teachers, for you teachers.
Oh.
Oh, hit us.
actually,
Go
yeah.
on.
Go
Go
for
for
it.
it.
Get around.
Wow.
Are you guys able to teach the way you like and what you like, or are you very limited by the curriculum that you have to teach?
I don't know.
curious.
For me, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I like the safety of having exam-based courses because I know that students having those boundaries and having those limits and having that as kind of this is what we have to do and this is where we need to go can be very helpful. But on the other hand, it can limit, and I feel that I worry a lot as a teacher that I'm just, teaching to the test, teaching to the exam so that they do really well. Because at the end of the day, if we're looking at the bigger picture, my students want to go on to, do these great and wonderful things, and they need the exam grades to do that. So yes and no. I don't know if you...
I mean, I would say for me, we do have a choice as to what we can teach in history. Not a massive choice, but we do have a choice. I did choose the French Revolution.
I was very happy with
for
that
the
choice.
record, I chose that. But I mean, I'd like there to be more choice, I would say. But I agree with you, there is a safety in it as
There
well.
is, yeah.
But also history is so, can I say the word darn? It's so darn
You can.
vast. There's so much of it. And
Yeah, well, it's the same with...
well, yeah, it seems, but isn't it
English
difficult?
it is difficult. It is very difficult to put those boundaries and guidelines, and I think that's kind of what part of a good teacher does, because the student not only is coming in there to learn, it's a safe space for them too. They want to, because we want them to participate, we want them to grow, and if they don't feel comfortable, whether that's because they don't like the subject, they don't necessarily like the teacher, or they don't know what they're doing, that idea of a student who's like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to sit here, right, and do
Sir,
nothing.
Can I make an interjection about this?
Yeah, go on.
I feel like this is a very interesting thing, like thinking about the futures of the students. So if a student is objectively bad at school, like say they don't have a good concentration or whatever, and they are constantly not performing well in their test, what would a good teacher do to help this student achieve those great things that they want to achieve?
That was Yuan Shao, ladies and gentlemen, president of the student council.
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting question, and again, I think the answer, that I used earlier, saying that one size does not necessarily fit all. I think each student, even though you're all in a classroom, and there could be, up to say in our school up to 24 students, each student is an individual, and they will have individual needs that the teacher has to be aware of, and we have to be aware of their learning patterns, the things that may work. So, on the surface, there could be things like intervention or, outside sessions, or potentially, offering more support. But for some students, that idea of giving them more is going to make them push.
Overwhelm, maybe.
Yeah, push them away. So it's finding that delicate balance that really helps the student do their best, and also be realistic too. Because if they are struggling, for example, I have students that I teach at GCSE, and for them getting a certain grade, they're not aiming for a 9, which is the top grade. They're aiming for a 6, which for them
Or a 4.
or a 4
Or
just
a 4,
to pass,
a pass.
which
Yeah.
is fantastic for
It
some
is.
students, which is fantastic. It really is, and it says a lot. Why are we laughing, guys?
He's disappointed to himself.
Oh no! But
Self-deprecating.
again, I think, and also this, I think as teachers, for those students that do have those goals, we need to make sure that they feel that that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to fall into that trap and be like, no, you should all get the best grades possible. Yeah, well, you should get the best grades possible for you. And I think that's really hard for students.
Right. So that's pretty much why I was asking, because I had a chat with Gabe the other day, who was struggling to study, he wasn't doing first term, not doing it as expected. So I said, I watched him for a bit, and then I realized that what he was actually doing was trying to study to understand the work, so to get some sort of satisfaction out of it.
Right.
And I had a chat, and we said, listen, don't study for your own satisfaction. It's not about you enjoying this, very contrary to what Elsa was saying before. It's about getting the grade that's expected of you. If you study with that in mindset, you will probably do better.
But why, when
So-
he was studying for his own self-interest, why was that holding him back in some way?
Because
Maybe that's just not what they want from him on the exam. Because I mean, like, remember chemistry, and we did GCSE chemistry. We had this, in my opinion, she was a very good teacher because she taught us how to study for the exam.
Right.
It wasn't, Miss Murphy. And at the end of the day, I aced that chemistry exam, which I never thought I would be able to do because I'm not, a STEM kind of person. But because she taught us how to study for the exam,
Exactly.
not all the extra stuff that's
exactly.
interesting.
And the reason to answer Elsa's question is that you have a target. When you're in Key Stage 3, 7, 8, 9, what you have to do is please your teacher, right? Study what's expected of you, get a good grade, but it's always in-house, right? When you're studying GCSEs and A levels, you have to study for somebody that doesn't know you, that's going to grade according to a plan they have. And if you don't study according to that, then you're not going to do well. That's very different from, hey, I like math, so I'm just going to do math. And I love quadratic equations or whatever, so I'm going to do those because I love them. It's very different. It's like, in fact, like any other work. So that's why I asked the teachers whether you are able to teach and you have the freedom to teach the way you have your style, or are you limited by that? Do you have to teach her, I'm assuming it's not always Dead Poet Society,
Oh,
Captain,
God,
my
no.
Captain.
I wish.
99% of the time, no.
No, absolutely not.
I taught for the exam.
Yeah, we
yeah.
have to. I think we have
How
to.
else would we get through the course?
How
it
would we
would
get through
never
the
get
course?
finished.
And I think as well, that not just the expectations of the students, also of the parents. They're expecting, because, at the end of the day, the grade that the students get, particularly in external exams, it represents what they have been doing. And if that grade doesn't match up with parents' expectations, then there are going to be questions asked, which puts us in a really uncomfortable position. And I think that's that pressure there that the exam courses do have. But I think
education's not ideal, is it? I mean,
No.
I like your idea, Elsa, of we would study because we enjoy it.
yeah,
But unfortunately, I remember even just teaching history, if at GCSE or A level,
Right.
if students start to ask me questions outside of the core content, sometimes I have to nearly shut them down
Right.
and say, look, you don't need to know that, and
Yeah.
we need to move on.
Right.
And it's not nice, and I did that quite a lot in your class.
Yeah.
Because I am
tears
under
shed.
pressure.
Yeah.
And I knew what had to be covered. And I thought, well, Robespierre needs to die now. He needs to die now. Stop asking me random questions. And it's quite stressful, actually. As a teacher, it's quite stressful, isn't it?
yeah, it definitely
Especially
is.
for us in humanity type subjects.
Yeah.
There's
It
a
is.
lot to wade through.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's definitely across the board. I mean, I've taught now 4 different curriculum
Yeah.
subjects at school, 3 here, and I mean, when I was teaching business, I really struggled with that too, because it was just there's so much content, and I myself, even though I have a background in part of my studies are in business, it wasn't something that interests me, and I felt that if I wasn't doing that, to your point you made earlier, Mara, about being interested in the course, I felt like a fraud. I felt like I am coming in all happy, jolly, being, okay, guys, let's talk about marketing today, which
God.
that I like, right? But then how do I get excited about finance? And I felt like such a fraud, because particularly as these students could see, oh, this actually has use in the real world. This could be, useful. Oh, and, this is something completely different. And I was, putting on a show. For them, and I think I just didn't enjoy that. That's not who I am as a teacher, because I think one thing that I like my students to learn from me is that I'm human, and I do make mistakes,
Same.
and I'm not perfect, and I don't know all the answers,
Yeah.
but I will try and help you find out the answer, and I will be there as much as I can. And I think that
makes a
Or
good teacher.
if
That's
I
like the
don't-
best kind of teacher.
Yeah.
I mean,
If you don't know the answer,
If you don't know.
you look it up.
Yeah,
We
you-
all
Yeah.
have the internet.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to make up something.
Right.
I can't make up
Yes,
the past.
I have had
It's
teachers.
happened.
I've had teachers who, that's the worst thing ever, and it makes you feel so terrible about the teacher. Where they, they'll get these questions from the students, and they'll answer in a way where it's clear that they do not know the answer. They're
Trying to
not
save their
really
pride.
fully addressing the question. They're kind of like taking this
Skirting
other
around
direction
it.
and not answering the question
Right.
when they need it. A teacher just need, like you guys said, if you don't know the answer,
Yeah.
you say, I don't know the answer, but I'll help you look for the
But
answer.
I think
Yeah.
that's hard too, because I think to go to that point, I know there is this kind of idea that we are supposed to know everything, and you guys are able to see that, we don't necessarily. That's not always the case. We obviously have a strong knowledge of our fields. We know how to teach. We've gone through all of the, we jumped through all the hoops, and there will be times where we are stumped. But I think as well, I don't know, with some students, I have to tell them, look, I'm not perfect, and I think to put, not to put us on pedestals in that sense, and kind of us
Definitely.
be, it's almost like a holy trinity, really. We need, students have to work with parents, they have to work with teachers, and
I think the younger students
Yeah.
would find it harder to believe that we don't know everything.
Yeah.
But the older the students get, the more I think they would appreciate that we
Right.
don't know everything.
I mean, especially because, it's like, at least for the history course and for English Lit too, but especially for history, because the specification is so oddly specific in certain bits,
Right.
that I would, like, literally message Miss Brown at, like, 2 a.m, and sometimes she would answer, and I'd be like, hi, Miss.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not recommended.
Not recommended for your
Don't say
sleep
that,
and your
okay?
social life. Okay, so I think we are coming almost to the end of this podcast, I think, but I would like to ask the people around the table one either piece of advice or one thing that you would like teachers to hear to finish this particular topic.
That's a nice question.
I know, I made them
Are we
all
gonna
up
ask? Are we
myself.
gonna ask the audience as well?
Well, they can jump in if they want
Yeah, I
to.
think they should.
I think
Just
they
sit
jump in if they
there.
want
Guys,
to.
jump
But that's the whole
in.
point of an audience,
Oh,
Miss Brown.
sorry. I thought it was interactive.
They
No?
can. Ewan did interact. I don't know if you were aware.
Sorry, my fault.
It's
Carry
okay.
on.
It's okay. We're heading now to Christmas. We are ready for that
ready.
break.
Yeah.
So, Mark, Elsa, and Albert as well. If there's something that a final thought you would like for teachers to know, or what makes a good teacher, or a particular idea that you would like to get across.
Well, I don't know. I was just, like, I think that a little bit of, I guess, comedy is good in a class. It's not.
Yep.
So that's another reason why people don't really like history, because they think it's very monotonous, which I guess in a sense it is. But last year we had so much fun. It wasn't always fun. There was some
Well recovered there.
Whoa. There were some anxious moments or angry
Yeah,
moments.
sure.
I did get angry at times.
Yes, everyone there was a lot of anxiety in that classroom at, like, during certain periods, but there was also funny parts that at the moment maybe weren't funny, like Danielle's comment, I ain't reading all that.
Don't bring that back to me. Daniel, if you're listening to this,
That has to be my favorite moment in history ever. Ms. Brown's response, excuse me. It was so bad, but it was just...
imagine the cheek of him. Imagine.
That's
I
gonna
ain't
be-
reading all that.
I ain't reading all that well.
Yes, you are.
I told Mr. Wright that the other day, and he was like, Danielle, did you say that? Taking the mick out of Ms. Brown. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
Awful. Bad student.
I mean, it makes, like, really memorable stories,
Sure.
and there's a lot of,
True.
like, fondness that you hold, you know,
Right.
for teachers and for the class, for your classmates. So I think that's also a good part of being a good teacher.
Sure.
Is being a bit
Man.
easygoing. Or mad.
Right, okay. Mad or easygoing, yeah, okay.
Exactly, like the comedy and also just kind of a friendly environment where students aren't scared. I think that's the thing. It's hard.
kind
It's
of
hard
the
for I
students'
find it
fault,
hard to
though.
like say just one thing because it's very like we're saying it's very multifaceted. Oh, Gabe has something to say, but yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say because everyone has. It's kind of all about balance and
Yeah.
like we've been discussing. Yeah, Gabe.
I'd say that I think for some teachers they have to
Crouch down, Gabe. Can't see you. There you go.
remember what it's like to be our age or just even students. 'Cause I feel like some teachers forget that and they just think that our life is only for the studying and we have nothing else to do.
Yeah, that's fair. And that you've more than one subject.
Yeah.
Yes.
That it's not
yeah.
just
Our
it's
subject.
not
That
just one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd like to give some advice to my younger peers.
Come on forward.
So based on my experience in school, I think it's important to choose more like the path that you want to go down academically. Like the correct path is worth more than your effort. So if you choose something that you don't like to do and you work really hard on that, that's less valuable than just choosing something that you're actually passionate about.
Yes. Miss Gilchrist, head of maths, and I were having this same discussion as it seems that lots of people feel they should choose maths, but that's a subject for another
That's
pod.
a whole other
That's a whole nother podcast we've got
Yeah.
right there, guys.
You could not pay me to do math.
We have another comment from our audience.
Okay,
Sorry.
so what Yovan said, basically he means not to choose chemistry.
Oh, we've got
Chemistry.
dishing the tea here. Dishing the
Mr.
tea.
Delchamp
Can I add?
won't be happy.
You can go for it, Roy.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, are you interested that if you add something and it changes color?
Sounds
It can be
riveting.
interesting when you see it for yourself, but like studying it is not that interesting.
Well, I've learned something from
So
that.
have I.
I've learned
Thank
something
you.
from that.
Every day
Albert,
is a learning day.
do you have anything that you would like to add after Roy's comments to build on what the girls have said or what the guys from the audience have said?
I have advice to parents, seeing as I'm a parent.
Indeed.
More than advice, just a word of admiration for teachers. Yeah.
That's nice.
It's true. There seems to be a generalized consensus through the parent body of the world that teachers are more like glorified babysitters. That's not true at all. I'd like to tell everybody that teachers work very, very hard to be where they're at. It's a huge responsibility they have, a huge amount of knowledge they have to have, not just of their subject, but of the child psychology, especially in this day and age. So I think we as parents have to respect that, have to recognize that whenever we talk to a teacher, and especially when we think we know more than the teachers, that is not true. We do not know more than teachers.
Yeah, I hear that.
That's all I have to say.
Wow, sing it loud and sing it proud.
I think that students, I like cherish my teachers so much. I know Miss Brown and I didn't get off to a great start, but you're one
we
of the
did.
best. Like honestly, like after the exams, when I came to like visit in August before school started, I was like, when you asked to give me a hug, I was like tearing up. Like
This is
I love my
nice.
teachers. Okay, they're amazing. And like also when I read my letter of recommendation from Mr. Wright and Miss McDonald,
Yeah.
also the Waterworks. So I have so much appreciation for my teachers, and they're amazing. So we need to appreciate
I think
them.
This
that's a
is-
piece of advice for students to actually appreciate their teachers. I think lots of people
They're human.
don't. People say that they do, but I don't think that people fully do oftentimes. And to see them as people too, I think it's important for both students and teachers to see each other as humans.
Just respect
Well,
both ways.
Respect
Right?
both ways.
Respect.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we've ended on such a positive note there. I would like to thank our lovely students and our audience for coming today. Also, our wonderful audiovisual team. Arts at the back there, waving, very happy. Also, our special guest, Miss Kate Brown from History.
Thank you. Thank you very
And
much.
We will be back hopefully soon. Thank you for having us.
Yay.
Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for coming. This is Life at Sunnyview School. Come and join us.